Put the phones away, put the phones away, put the phones away. All right. So far, with linear perspective, both in 1-point and 2-point perspective, we have dealt with a scenario which is not what we normally run into when we just walk around and look at things in life, where everything needed to be nice and perfectly aligned, either parallel to one another or perpendicular at nice, perfect right angles. And a lot of sort of our man-made world is that way, I suppose, right? Most buildings that you walk in, that's kind of how walls are done and such. But when we have just a collection of objects, like the scattered detritus on this table that I'm sitting at right now, those things are rarely sitting at nice, perfect right angles to each other. They're usually not perfectly aligned with one another. They just sort of land where they do. And so 1-point and 2-point perspective aren't going to accomplish that for us. So how do we deal with still life? Well, all the objects are going off in different directions, right? Well, they're not at nice, perfect right angles to one another. So no two boxes would have the same vanishing points, right? When we have all these objects turned in different directions, each object would have its own set of vanishing points, because it's turned differently from what might be next to it or what it's sitting on top of, things of that nature. Well, this time around, we're going to dive into some ways of getting a pretty accurate representation of what's in front of you. It is going to mean I'm going to have to spend a little time up here as a talking head, and you're going to want to take some notes because we're diving into some stuff that builds on everything that we've learned so far, but could be very new to a lot of you. So I want you to make sure you're taking some good notes on it. All right, so this time around, we're diving into what is referred to as intuitive perspective. In your syllabus, it also gets referred to as freehand perspective. I ran into issues with referring to it as that because there were students who assumed that meant we no longer use the ruler. What we do. But we refer to this as intuitive perspective. We're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about means by which we take visual measurements in order to get something on the page that's accurate to what our eyes are seeing. Now, one of the problematic things about intuitive perspective is, well, I guess I should say one of the problematic things about trying to teach intuitive perspective is that it is very dependent upon being that one-eyed observer. And it's hard sometimes to teach it because I can't show you what my eyes are literally seeing. I've got some photographs I'll flip through that kind of attempt to do this. But to help illustrate it, I've got a small, not at all accurate version up here of this still life that I have sitting in front of me, so that I can sort of show you on this what I'm going to be doing out here in front of my eyes. So with intuitive perspective, this time around, we no longer need a horizon. We no longer need any vanishing points. But intuitive perspective still operates as if those things were out there somewhere. We just don't have to put them on the page anymore. It still operates under those rules, right? This object right here, and the one on top of it as well, are clearly below my eye level. I can see the top. I can see, with this one, two sides. This one I can see one side. I can't go around and look at the other sides. I can't go underneath and look at the bottom. And just like in linear perspective that we've been doing, the lower things get below my eye level, the closer they are getting to me, the closer they are to the viewer, the larger they are, things of that nature. And we can assume that these two lines would eventually meet at some vanishing point over here somewhere. These two lines would eventually meet at some vanishing point over there. And those two would eventually meet at some vanishing point. But each object has a different set. So it wouldn't behoove us to try to figure out where those vanishing points should be or where the horizon should be. So we don't need either one of those. But what we do need to do is take some visual measurements. Now, when you're starting off with intuitive perspective, the first mark you're going to make on this page is completely and utterly, the scale of it and everything is up to you. I usually will start with a corner of an object that's close to me, but I get to determine how tall it should be or short on the page because it's my drawing. It'll be the thing that then determines the scale of everything else. I have students who will often get confused and think that they should make the first line, and for me it's going to be this line on these objects out here, should be literally the size that they see it, which for me would be like that big. I'd be making a very tiny drawing if I did that. Right? I don't need that. What I need is a line that makes sense for the scale of the drawing that I want to do. So I'm going to give myself a vertical line for that right there. And it can be as tall as I want it to be. I'll say that right there is the height of that box. I get to make that decision. That then is going to determine everything else. Right? Because this will be my comparison that I compare how wide this box should be. It'll be the comparison I use for other objects as well. All right, now, this is what I'm looking at. This box is sitting in front of me, right? And I'm pretty much seeing it in two-point perspective. I've got one side going off in this direction. I've got one side going off in that direction. But I don't have any vanishing points for me to figure out what those angles should be. So here is a skill that we're going to work on. When you take your measurements, for you guys, it's not going to be too much of a big deal because you're going to be at a drawing horse. For me, I have to take my measurements and then turn around and do this whole thing. So I'm going to try to always try to make sure my feet are in these two spots right here. So I'm always taking my measurements from the same spot. If you're drawing from a standing position and you have a tendency to hunker down when you draw, always come back up to a standing position to actually take your measurements so that your head is always in the same place. So what we're trying to do is make ourselves into that one-eyed observer. So whenever I take my measurements, I'm going to look out at my objects and I'm going to close one eye. That way I know I am that one-eyed observer. And I'm always going to try to make sure my head is in the same spot when I'm looking. I wouldn't want to shift over here and take some measurements and then shift over here and take some measurements. I always want to make sure my head's here, or else I'm going to have weird, wonky perspective. Then, something that you're going to need to do. Surely you've seen either cartoons or some sort of jokey, comic booky kind of thing that shows a stereotypical artist, and they're always looking at something going, like this. Well, the reason they're doing that is because that's something that we actually do. Now, they're cartoonifying it and making it goofy. What I want you to do is when you're taking your measurements, you need to hold your arm out at arm's length, elbow unbent, and hold your pencil at a 90-degree angle from your arm. Right? Now, what's going to happen when you're out there taking measurements, and I'll try to point it out and catch it when I can, is that your brain is going to want to make you point this pencil away from you at an angle, and then that becomes problematic for what we're going to do here. You want this at a 90-degree angle from your arm, because now it is a completely flat thing to compare the drawing to, and your paper is a flat thing. So what I'm going to do is holding my arm out in front of me at arm's length, unbent elbow, I'm going to have my pencil at a right angle to my arm, and what I'm going to do out in front of me is I'm going to turn my wrist until my pencil lines up with that line right there out there in front of me. And then I will know that's the angle that I need for this line right here. Make sense? Let me get my feet back in the same spot. So I'm closing one eye, I have my arm out at arm's length, I have my pencil at a right angle for my arm, and I'm going to turn this pencil, and now I know that right there is the angle that I need. Now for you, it's going to be simple enough to then just take this straight down to your paper, line up your ruler with it, make the mark. For me, I got to turn around. I'm going to try my best not to lose this angle as I do. All right. So I bring my angle down here to the page. I line up my ruler with it. And I don't know how long this needs to be yet. So I'm just pulling the line out there some. I'm going to take some other measurements to figure out how long that should be. That's not right. My hand moved on the way here. Yep. Looking at it, I could tell that was a much steeper angle than what I had. For you, it'll be a lot simpler because you'll be taking a measurement and then boom, right here. Me, I'm having to like do this whole circle thing. All right, now I need that line up there. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to close my eye, turn this pencil, which is again at a 90-degree angle from my arm, until it lines up with this line right here. Then I bring this down to my paper, line my ruler up with it. And again, I'm just going to pull a line out. I don't know how far I need it yet. Then I can check myself. Because I know, even though I don't have a vanishing point on my page, these two lines should meet eventually somewhere. So I can look and say, well, does it look like they would? And yeah, it does. Right? I don't have one going off at a weird angle. If I had had that line that I had accidentally put there, those two lines would be going further and further apart and would never meet. These two lines, I know they're going to meet somewhere, way out here. Now I'm going to do the same thing for these two lines here, the top and bottom of that side. So my arm out at arm's length, pencil at a 90-degree angle to my arm. I don't know how long I need the line yet, so I'm just drawing it out there some. I can kind of eyeball. Yeah, those would eventually meet somewhere. All right. So there, I've got my lines that make up these two sides, but I need to cap them off. Now, so far, I've just been saying kind of eyeball it. Is this thing longer than it is wide? What have you? But now, I actually can take a measurement. Because I know one thing on the page is accurate. And it's that. Because I got to choose that. So I know that's right. There's no way that part could be wrong. So what if I take that and compare it to the length and the width of my box? So here's what I'll be doing. In order to get this measurement in front of me, again, you'll want to have your pencil at a right angle from your arm, have your arm out at arm's length. The reason you want your elbow unbent is because if you bend your elbow, right, the pencil can be larger or smaller in your eyesight. Keeping it out here at arm's length keeps this pencil as a consistent measurement taker. Right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my pencil up out there in front of me so that the tip of it is right here at the top of this line. And then right here at the bottom, I'm going to put my thumb right there. And then I know everything that's showing on my pencil is the height of my box. And then I'll take that and I'll compare it to this. Like, see how many of those I get? Like 1, 2, 3, however many. So I'll show you and then I'll explain what I've done. So right there, that is the height of my box out there. It doesn't necessarily correspond to what's on my page, but it does for what's out there. Now I'm turning my wrist, and I'm going to count how many of these I get this direction. All right, so I get one, about 1.5. What I did was I took that, I turned my arm this way, and I went 1, and then I moved out to where it had ended, and it didn't quite go all the way out to 2. So I'm going to say about 1.5. Now, I wouldn't use that measurement on the page. This is how tall my box is on the page, out there rather. This is how tall it is on the page. So instead, what I want to do is now say, here's my height. There's 1. That would be 2. Right here would be about 1/2. So I'll put my line there. based on measurements I took out there. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Take this measurement again and compare it to that width. Right, there's the height of my box again. I turn it, and it's just slightly shorter than one of these. So if there's that, take it to here, and it's just slightly shorter, so maybe about there. And I give myself a vertical. Right? That was because I knew this line right here was accurate on my page, because I got to decide it. So I could take that and compare it to other things that I see out in front of me. Now, why you want to make sure that you're holding your pencil at a right angle to your arm is, again, because your paper is flat. Now, what's going to happen, like that line is moving away from you in space. So you're going to be like taking a measurement of this, and then when you turn to take this angle, you're going to point it away from yourself. Because your brain is like, that line's going away from me, so I should point outward like that. But watch what happens if I do that. Let's say if I point this pencil away from me and line it up with this line. Right, that was pointing away from me. I bring it back to the page, and my hand flattens out, and suddenly I've got a line that's going way up like that. Very incorrect to what my eyes are seeing. Keeping that pencil at a right angle to my arm keeps it flat, so that when I bring it down to the paper's flat, it lines up. All right, so now I need that line and that line. So I'll do the same thing that I did down here. I'm going to put my arm out, have that pencil at a right angle, turn it until I get that line, and turn it until I get that line. All right. Line my pencil up with it. Line my ruler up with it. I don't know for sure how far out it needs to go, so I'm just pulling it outward, and I can kind of compare. Yeah, it looks like those would meet at a point somewhere. Now I need this line here. Let me strengthen that line a little bit. All right. That gives me then a pretty accurate depiction of the larger buck that's sitting on the bottom. All right. Now, I have this smaller box that's sitting up on top. I need to figure out where exactly I'd put it, and somehow it has moved since I sat it down because I couldn't see that side earlier. I need to kind of figure out the scale, where it should sit, things like that. Well, I can sort of figure out things like, what I'd like to figure out is try to figure out how to get from this corner to there. I'll explain. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my pencil. I'm lining it up with the corner of the box here and that corner of that box there. Which gives me this kind of angle like this. And all I'm doing is putting a mark like that because I know now that box should be somewhere out there. Actually, I think it's pretty good. I think right about there should do it. Eyeballing it from there. So now, I'm going to give myself a vertical. I'm going to give myself that vertical right there. I don't know how tall it needs to be, so I'm just going to go up. Then I need to get these lines right here. Now, it looks kind of like one-point perspective to me, but I'll bet those angles are just ever so slightly off from being perfectly horizontal. So I'm going to go ahead and take measurements just to be on the safe side. I'm getting this line and this line. Pretty close to horizontal, but not perfectly. Get the top one as well. No, never mind. Not that one yet, because I don't have the height of this figured out yet. All right, so I almost made a mistake. I was making that line, then I was going to come over here, but I don't know where to put it. I need to figure out how tall that box is first. Again, one measurement I know is correct is that one. So I'm going to take that measurement again and compare it to this smaller box on top. and I don't know, maybe about 2/3 of that. So it's here, maybe about there. Boom. So put a mark there just so I. Now I'll get that angle on the top. Just pulling it out for a distance. I don't know how long I'm going to need it. Now I need to figure out how wide it should be. But rather than using this one again, because you see how this box is kind of squarish, that's how it looks out there for me as well, I'll take this measurement. I'll do this right here, taking my thumb here and that there, and then compare that. Because that's going to be easier than this, using this, which is bigger than it. So I'm getting this measurement up here. Right? That's the height of my box up here. And as I suspected, they're pretty much the exact same. So that, there-ish. Well, I look at that, and I'm like, yep, those two lines would eventually meet at a point somewhere. And then I can only see the top of this box. So I'm going to get this angle and this angle. Just pulling up because I don't know exactly how long I need it to be. I can just see a little sliver on the top of this, so I'm not even going to bother measuring that. And the line is pretty much the exact same as the one below it, so I'm just going to go right there. Boom. And then erase out my lines, the imaginary. I can't see these lines up here. They were just there to help out. I can't see these lines in here. That's behind the box. All right? And then I can do the same thing with my cone down here. My cone, which is kind of down here by the corner, but also down a bit, so I'll say it should sit about right there. How wide should it be? Well, I can make a comparison to this up here, because it's small. I don't want to try to make a comparison to that. So I'm going to get the width of my box again and compare it to my cone. So what I'm doing is putting my thumb there and then coming down here. Right? It's just a little bit smaller than this. So maybe there and there. I know I need my ellipse to fit in there. Now, how tall should that thing be? Well, let me get the center line. I'm just going to draw it upward. I don't know how tall I need it to be just yet. But I know I've got my width right, so I'll compare the width to the height. If this is the width of my cone, I turn around and go 1. It's almost perfectly 2 times as tall as it is wide. There's 1. There's 2. Comes to about right there. And then you know how to finish off a cone at this point. And then I'm erasing out these lines I don't need. And there I have a pretty accurate depiction of what my eyes are seeing in front of me, with 3 objects that were, well, these 2 objects that were turned at very different angles from one another. It's very difficult to show you what's happening from my point of view when I'm up there teaching. So I learned fairly early on that I needed some sort of depiction to show you where I was coming from, so you can see things from my perspective. So I took all these photographs from where I was standing as I was drawing. And so I'm interested in drawing this little grouping of objects right here. The big box, the one on top of it, the cone, this little sphere. All right? So just like I mentioned up there, I can just start with a vertical line that corresponds with this right here, this line right here, this corner, and it can be as tall as I want it to be. Then out in front of me, holding that pencil at a right angle to my arm, I'm turning that pencil to get that angle, that one, and that one. All right? Then I want to know how wide my box should be. So it's not perfectly lining up because I was having to hold the phone in front of me to take the picture. But what I'm doing is putting the tip of this pencil at the tip of that corner and trying to put my thumb at the very bottom of that corner. The camera just throws it off a little bit. Then I take that measurement and I compare it to the width. So I send it to 1, 2, maybe about 2.5. I come down to my paper and I'm like, there's my height. 1, 2. Right there would be about 2.5. Put my line in place. Out here, I take that measurement again, compare it to that. It's not quite as wide as it is tall. So I come over here. I'm like, pinch it in a little bit. There's my vertical. Then I get that angle, again, by holding my pencil at a right angle to my arm and turning it. Get that angle. And now I have a box in place. I erase out those stray marks. Then I'm trying to figure out where to place this box. So what I did was I took, again, this measurement because I know that's accurate. And I was like, how far away is this box from that corner? And then I took that measurement. I put myself a line in place. And I can see where I made a mistake and put one line in the wrong spot. All right, now that I figured that angle, that one, and that one. Then I forgot to take a photograph of it, but I took this measurement again because it's the one on my page that I know is accurate. And I compared it to this. So there's how wide it should be. So, there. And it looks like I forgot to take a picture of me taking a measurement to figure out how tall it should be as well. But now, I want to figure out how wide I should make it. But you see, it's just this little tiny sliver. So rather than going back for this measurement again, I took the measurement here, compared that to how wide this is, and it's about half. So I got that in place. Then I get that angle. Erase out what I don't need. Lastly, I'm trying to think, well, not lastly, but next, I'm trying to think about this cone. And I was like, all right, it's really close to that corner, but I need to figure out how wide it is. So I took this measurement again. Because as you're completing these drawings, the more objects you get on the page, the more you know is accurate on the page. And so you don't always have to return to the exact same measurement that you started with. So I'm like, well, that looks like it might be about as wide as this, so let me make that comparison. So I take that, I go over to this, and I'm like, well, yeah, wow, I was right. That's pretty close. So I take that, go over here, I kind of make a couple of quick marks like it should be about that wide. I get my ellipse in place, find the center, figure out how tall it should be. All right, it should go up to about there. I give myself that vertical line and finish it off. Erase what I don't need. Then again, I've got this sphere that's sitting down here, and I'm looking at everything, and I was like, you know what? That sphere looks like it might be about as wide as the box is, too. So maybe take that measurement there, compare it to the sphere, and I was like, yep, they're pretty close. And I was also thinking, I could see a little bit of the corner of the box over here. So I was like, so it should be sort of down here-ish, because I could still see a little bit of the corner. It's going to be about that wide, so get those marks. I know it should also be as tall as it is wide, because it's a sphere. So I made those marks for myself, and then I put my circle in place. And because I'm human, I mucked it up. So I went in there and fixed up what I had made a mistake, erased that out, and now I have a pretty accurate representation of what was in front of me, with any differences between the photograph and the drawing coming mostly from the fact that I'm having to hold a camera out in front of me and it's not perfectly where my eyes are. All right, but even with that, the two are pretty close to one another. So, your turn. Come on out here. And you kind of have to learn by doing. You don't need a horizon line. You don't need vanishing points. Whether or not you put your paper in landscape or in portrait orientation is also up to you, depending on what you're interested in drawing. Start with a vertical line that makes up the corner that is closest to you on the object you would like to start with drawing, and then build from there.